Hello everyone, welcome back to Self Learning Hub. Today we are going to learn about how to create an ETL project in Microsoft Fabric in the form of pipelines and in Data Factory. So here are the steps that we're going to follow in order to complete our ETL project. First, we're going to upload a file into Lakehouse, then create a warehouse and create a pipeline, and within the pipeline create different activities such as copy activity to load data into warehouse table, and then after loading the data into warehouse table, we're going to go through with that tables data in order to understand the data so that we can do the cleaning wherever it is necessary and then load the data into different tables from a single file. To be clear here, we are going to load the data from one single file into different tables using set variables and for each activity available in the data factory pipeline. So let's get started. So, this is a pipeline that I have already created to extract the data and clean and load the data into different tables of warehouse. So now I'm going to take you through how I have created this pipeline. So let's create a new pipeline by learning through. Let's go into my workspaces and learning workspace. And here, let's go into my lakehouse, create a folder, name it as ETL Project. I'm creating folder so that I can upload all the files related to this project in one place. It will be easy to read and identify all the files of a particular project if you create subfolders. Right, in the ETL project, I'm going to upload a file, browse, this is my file, vehicle dimensions, upload, yes, uploaded. Let's see, refresh and click on the folder to see all the files within that folder. So there we see a file is uploaded and our next step is to create a warehouse. So for that, we need to go into workspace and then click on new. Here, click on warehouse so that we can create ETL warehouse. Let's name it as ETL warehouse. Create. Right. Now our ETL warehouse is ready. Let's see, our next step is to create a pipeline. To create a pipeline, again, let's go into Learning Workspace and click on New and select Data Pipeline to create a new pipeline. Let's name it as ETL Pipeline. Create. Right, now we are in the ETL pipeline canvas. So let's see what is our next step. Our next step is load data into warehouse table using a copy activity. Right, so here is the copy data activity. Click on Add to Canvas and give it a name, copy to warehouse, and go to source. My source file is in the workspace and in Lakehouse, my Lakehouse, and in the files. The file name is ETL, under the ETL project folder, vehicle dimension is my folder. Select the file and then the file format need to be selected appropriate based on the file, whatever the file you uploaded. So now this is my Excel file. So I'm selecting file format as Excel. And in the settings, you need to select first row as header. Okay. And next, in the source again, in the source, we also need to select the shade. So I have only one shade, and that is the data that I want to load into warehouse. So I've selected sheet 2, and next to destination. Destination, I want to load the data into a warehouse this time rather than lakehouse. So I'm going to select data warehouse and select what is your warehouse name. My warehouse is ETL warehouse. And as there are no tables that I've created already, so I'm going to opt for auto create table and giving a schema name, this table, and the table name as vehicles data dump, right? And go to mappings, click on import schema so that it will import the schema from the file, from the source file. Right, my source file is having three columns: table name, code, label. And in the destination table as well, it maps to exactly the same columns. And let's validate. So no errors. Let's run this to load the data from our lakehouse file into a warehouse table. Run. Right. Well, it's succeeded. Let's see if the table is created in our ETL warehouse. Go to workspace and go to ETL warehouse. Right. In the warehouse under the TPO schema, there is a table called vehicles data dump is created and the data from the file is loaded into this table. And our next step is to understand the data. So for that, we can see there are three columns: table name, code, label. And as you can see, this single table holds the data for different tables. So for the vehicle type, it is holding code and label. And for towing and articulation table, the code and label information is stored in the same table. So there are around 10 tables of information is stored within the single table name. And luckily, for all these 10 tables, the data structure is same. There are only two columns, code and label, for all these tables. Right. Now, let's see. If we have to filter the data based on the table names, then we are going to have only two columns for each table, right? As this is a table name, if we have to create a new table for vehicle type, that means we are going to create two columns, code and label. And code is going to be a primary key. So we need to clean the data as in not to include any null values or any unnecessary values. So let's sort this to see if there are any nulls. Right, this is a cool feature, right? You can click here itself to sort the data, and it sorts based on the data existed in that column. And as I can see, there are various nulls existed within the core, where, as I mentioned, we are going to make this as a primary key into our new tables. We don't accept nulls, so we need to filter out all the nulls data. And also -1 is defined wherever there is a data missing. So I also need to exclude -1 as it is clearly mentioned that there is some data is missing. So I don't want to see -1 and null within this code while I'm uploading into different tables. So I need to filter the data based on the table name, and also I need to filter the whole data to exclude nulls and -1s. So we're going to do all this filtering and cleaning of data and moving the data by creating new tables based on the table names and moving the data into those new tables. We are going to do all this using a pipeline. So before going into the pipeline, let's look into a SQL query and let's write a query to clean the data and filter the data. Let's go into our query, click on new SQL query and start printing everything from the table initially. So this is going to give me everything from this table vehicles data dump. And from this table, I want to clean the data by excluding nulls and as well as -1s as we discussed before. So I basically want to see all the code where it is greater than 0. And click run. This is a case sensitive. Right. So here it gives everything, all codes and all the data simply by excluding nulls and -1s, which I want. And you can see the starting number is 1. I also want zeros. Basically, I just want to exclude -1 and null values. Even for zeros, I have some meaningful values. So yeah, so we've cleaned our data by excluding some unnecessary data. And now I want to split this based on a specific table. Let's say this is our table name. Copy that. And table name equals to final articulation. Right. So this is all the code and label values for the table towing and articulation. So I want to filter this data for towing and articulation like this here in the query. And after once it is filtered, I want this data to be dumped into a new table called towing and articulation. And I only want two columns, code and label, and I don't want table name column in my new table. Right. And the code column is still a varchar. So I want this to cast as int. There you see. Now we got this as an integer column and we got only two columns, code and label. And all this information is for the table towing and articulation. So this is how we are going to clean and filter the data and move this result into a new table by creating a new table called towing and articulation, right? So for your understanding, let's also do another filter for, I think there is a vehicle type, right? So this information is for vehicle type. So we are going to filter the data for vehicle type and move this data by creating a new table called vehicle type. So this is how we can clean and filter the data using query. But what we are trying to do is um, we are going to make this as an automated process and we are going to create a pipeline by letting the pipeline do all these steps like clean the data and filter the data and move this filtered data into a new table. So we are going to automate this process so that every time there is a new data arrives, we can schedule this pipeline to run every day based on the times usually we get new data in, and then we can run this pipeline so that simply just clicking on run the pipeline, we can simply get the cleaned and transformed data and filtered data and load it into multiple tables, right? So we are basically taking one single table and doing some cleaning and filtering steps and transforming all the filtered data into multiple tables. So this we are going to do by creating a pipeline, right? Right, we already have a copy activity, right? So what this copy activity do is loading the data from our lakehouse file into our warehouse table, right? And now from the table from the table of data that is loaded as a vehicle's data dump, from that table, I need to filter the data and clean the data and to load that data into new tables, right? So for that, first I need activity called set variables. So here I'm going to name it as set table names. And in this, again, we need to create a new table name. And this is an array as we are going to provide multiple variables, confirm. And in the values, we need to provide. So in order to get all these values, what all the values are available, we need to grab them as in to pass as our variables in our pipeline. So for that, I'm going to copy this query. And this time I'm going to say distinct table name. And that it gives me a list of all the distinct values in the column name table name, right? So I need to use all these values from here. I need to provide all those values in the table name column of the table vehicle data dump. So I have already gathered all those table names, and each table name we are giving as a variable now. So everything need to be wrapped in quotations, and we can add multiple variable names as a comma separated, and all these variables names should be within the square brackets, right? Let's copy this and paste it here. As you can see, page band of driver is one of the value from the table column, and driver home area is one of the column from the table name column, right? So these are all the distinct values from the table name column from vehicle data dump table. Just to mention you again, so this is the table, and in the table name column, I've gathered all the distinct values as a variables, right? I've gathered all these distinct values and added all of them into my variables within a double quotations and comma separated format, and wrapped all those variables within the square brackets as it is considered to be an array of variables. Right. So this is about setting variables. Now we need to use these variables as a parameters to filter the data and to move the data into new tables. Let's see how we can do that. For that, we need to add a for each activity. So let's add this. And in the for each activity, in the settings, we need to mention items. So items in a sense like it will be looking for items, what that it needs to use for every iteration. So here items are nothing but the variables that are coming from the set variable. So add dynamical content. Click on add dynamic content. So you'll be directed to the section and go to variables. Select table name. Table name is our variable name that we have created just before. So select table name. Automatically you can see this thing appear here and click OK. Right. Yes, we now set the items as well for each activity, and now we need to tell this for each activity what it needs to do for every time it receives a variable from the previous activity, which is set variables. So click this edit and see for every time when it receives a variable, it needs to filter the data and copy that data. So basically, we need to copy the filtered data into a new table whenever a new variable is received into for each activity. Right. So for that, we need a copy data activity. So let's add copy data activity here, and this is name it as copy filtered data. Right. And in the source, so my source data is basically coming from the data warehouse and ETL warehouse, and my source data is basically coming from a table vehicles data dump. Right. From this table, I need to filter the data and load that data into different tables. So this time, in order to filter this here itself, this time I use query. So here we have already created one of the query earlier before. So let's go to the warehouse and go to the query which we have created earlier, as in to understand and clean the data. So this is the exact query I'm going to use it here. So copy this and go back to our ETL pipeline. Here in the query, I'll click on add dynamic content and paste it here. Also, I need another filter condition to filter table name equals to a specific table name that is passed as a variable in here, right? For that, um, I'll go into for each iteration and I'll select for each, so that item will come into here. And we need to concat all these and make it as a dynamic SQL. And this has to be right. And click OK. And in the destination, lakehouse, my destination is data warehouse, and select ETL warehouse. And as I have no tables already created, I'll select auto create, and where schema name is DBO and table name is add dynamic. I prefer to add dynamically. So my table name is like for every iteration, whatever the item is passed as a variable, that is the table name I want to give to a new table. Yeah, this table name should get okay, and mm, and it will map automatically. Now, right, this is the copy activity we created within the for each iteration in order to filter the data and load the filtered data into a destination table based on the variable name passed into for each iteration. So let's go back to the main canvas. Uh, right. So let's move this like this. Right. Now you're ready with all these three activities. And before making a connections in the copy data, we need to make a small change as we have already moved the data from the source file into our destination table. So now the table is already created, right? As in our previous step. So now we have to change this to use existing, and yeah, we need to select vehicles data dump table. And in the advanced section, we also need to mention delete from vehicles data dump as I want to override the data. If you don't mention this, whatever the for every time it copies the data from the file into this table, it will append the data into the existing data in the table. So as I don't want to append the data and override, I'm using pre-copy script as before copying the data into destination, it will look into the pre-copy script and it will delete the data as I mentioned, a query to delete the data from vehicle data dump, and then it will start copying the data from source into destination. Right? Let's connect all these activities on completion, on completion, and in the for each activity in the settings, I'm going to say sequential so that it will run the copy activity for each and every single variable. Right. Once we are ready with everything, with all the connections to each and every activity and everything is all set, then let's validate to see if there are any missing values or any errors to fix. So as there are no any issues to fix, then it's all ready to go. Click run to start the pipeline activity. Click save and run, and let's wait for it to finish the process. And you can see the status for each and every activity. So the status is already succeeded for our first two activities. One is copy data activity is successed and setting the variables activity is also succeeded, and it started the process of running a copy data activity within the for each activity. So right now all of our steps are succeeded, and we can see the pipeline status itself is also saying succeeded. So let's see. Let's check our warehouse to see how many tables it loaded the data into. So let's go to our warehouse. There we go. So there are almost 20 tables have been created automatically by running our pipeline. So here you can see all these tables were created. Earlier we only have a single table called vehicles data dump, and now we can see almost 20 tables which have been created by our pipeline automatically using all the variables and parameters that we have passed to and using some SQL queries within the pipelines and all the steps that we have formed in the pipeline. So this is how we can create a ETL project, and this is how we can automate the process of cleaning and transformation and loading the data into different tables in the warehouse. So let's go back to our ETL pipeline. Right, we're again back into our pipeline. Let's see now have to create a schedule so that schedule to run this pipeline every day. So that automatically every day whenever it will run the pipeline, so that every day whatever the new data that you get into your vehicles data dump, it will automatically get cleaned and split the data into different tables and load it into your different tables, right? So for that, create a schedule. Let's click on the schedule to create. So currently it says scheduled run is off. So turn it on, select a frequency. I'm going to say daily, enter a specific time. So I'm going to say run this every day. Mm, yeah, run this every day at 8 o'clock in the evening. And the starting date would be today. And let's give an end date in a future and click apply. So now a schedule has been created. So every day at 8 p.m., this pipeline will automatically run. And go to your copy data. Before that, you need to do one small change. Go to your copy data in for each activity. Click here, and in the destination, so as we for the first time itself we can use auto create table, and now all these tables have been created, so no more we require to use this auto create table. Instead we can say use existing table, right? An existing table will automatically be passed from our items, which is nothing but our variables will pass the table name, and that's it. Validate. So yeah, no issues. So this is all about creating an ETL pipeline. Hope you guys understood, and please comment if you have any questions. I'll try to help you. Thank you very much, and please don't forget to subscribe.